All right, I think we're going to get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Wade Baker, one of the founders of the Scientia Institute. We are excited to do this. We've never actually done this before. We do lots of speaking about our individual projects, but rarely do we get a chance to do a smorgasbord of lots of them. So here today, everybody on the team has picked their favorite finding from our 2022 research. And we're going to share that with you and tell you why we like that one, what it's about, and that kind of thing. So hopefully it's a chance for you to get to know a little bit more about some research that maybe you missed, or a finding that you didn't quite see in a perspective that we did, and also meet some of the team. So a little bit of background on Scientia Institute, in case you're not familiar with us. We're a data science and research firm. Everything we do is focused on cybersecurity. Here is some of the stuff that we have published over the years. So by my count, we have published about 70 reports since we started. We have worked with about 20 different sponsors or vendors at my last count. And 18 of those reports were published in calendar year 2022, depending on how you count some of them. Some of them are smaller or derivative and we don't count them. But all that to say, lots of research, and we'll be catching you up on some of the 2022 stuff as we go here. So I'll go ahead and start, since I'm already speaking, with my pick from 2022 research. It comes from some work that we did with Security Scorecard. Now, Security Scorecard was a new research partner for us in 2022. And if you're not familiar with what they do, they have lots of outside-in security scanning. They look at the external-facing infrastructure of organizations and assess lots of security aspects. This particular report was about vulnerability prevalence and remediation. So what they see about vulnerabilities in that infrastructure, internet-facing infrastructure. And what this finding is looking at is the ratio of open and closed vulnerabilities. And the reason I find this so interesting is, one, it's remarkably consistent. So if you just follow the number of observed vulnerabilities across whatever infrastructure that organization has, 100 assets, 10,000 assets, 10 million assets, and you look at the closed vulnerabilities, not assets, but you look at the ratio of open to closed, it's about 1 to 10, regardless of how many vulnerabilities are in the environment, which is a good proxy for the size of the environment. And it really suggests that there is a capacity constraint to organizations' ability to remediate vulnerabilities. And another reason I like this one is because we measured this exact same thing with another organization, Kenna Security, over the years. And the first time we did that, we also found a 1 in 10 remediation capacity. It improved to 15% later. But I think this is very interesting. It says a lot about the problem of vulnerability management and why it's so hard and why prioritization is needed. And that leads to the next slide. I'll cue up Jay Jacobs talking about vulnerability remediation.
All right. Thanks, Wade. I'm Jay Jacobs, co-founder here and data scientist. And I've done a lot of the research with Kenna. This is in our 8th volume that we've done with them. And if you're into vulnerability management, and who isn't, let's be honest, that whole series is just absolutely one of my favorite bits of research that we've been able to work on. And last year we did, like I said, volume 8. And this particular graphic that we're looking at here is, I believe, the last one in the whole report. And at the end of that report, we did essentially a simulation. And I generally don't like it when researchers do simulations because I much more prefer real world observations. But we did this simulation using the vulnerabilities that organizations had open when we pulled the last bit of data. So we're using essentially the data that companies are looking at, and we used different strategies. Like you can see, the bottom one is random. That is, like if they just randomly picked things to remediate, this is how they would do. And we calculated this thing called an exploitability score, and we talk about it in the report. But the whole point of this is that we've got 2 different things that we could tweak here. One is the type of remediation strategy, and that is the different rows in that graphic. And the second thing is the capacity. So Wade was just talking about, 7.5 up to, I can't remember what it was, 12, 13%, 25 to 75 percentile. This is doing the same thing that we saw. This is going from the low capacity to a high capacity, from the red to the blue. And the key thing that we take away from this is that it is much better to work on your prioritization strategy than your overall capacity. And I think that's a really interesting takeaway, that if you could work smarter, it's much better than working harder. And I think it applies to things even outside of security, honestly. But with that, I will pass it on to Olivia. Olivia, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Olivia. I'm a data scientist here at Scientia. And last year, I had the privilege of working with Cisco on the third volume of their security outcomes report. And our analysis uncovered 7 specific success factors that we observed to strongly boost an organization's cyber resilience. And I think these lucky 7 factors are an interesting takeaway. So for this specific report, we surveyed over 4,700 security professionals across 26 different countries about their perspectives on security resilience. And we found that organizations whose security programs have these lucky 7 elements in place found themselves within the top % of all organizations scored security resilience, while organizations that do not have these in place actually fell to the bottom 10th percentile. So we have these 7 factors here for you to read, but I'll read them off to you as well. So first is getting executive buy-in for your security program. Second, ingraining a good security practices in your organization's culture. You also want to maintain reserves of staff and other resources for major unexpected security incidences. Make hybrid cloud environments more homogeneous. Maximize the adoption of zero trust practices. Extend XDR capabilities to include threat intelligence and automation. And then, of course, put SASE into place. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and pass the floor over to Ben.
Thanks. I love being sassy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Elevate Security. So Elevate Security is a partner we've worked with. This is our 2nd report we've done with them. We did a report in 2021. What they look at is human factors in cybersecurity. So generally looking at kind of all the mistakes people make and they trip over and they get duped by that cause security incidents, things like phishing, accidentally downloading malware, maybe hitting a website you shouldn't hit, those kinds of things that are usually the genesis of a security incident. And so they do a great job of tracking that across an organization and looking at how organizations handle those and trying to locate that kind of human risk. We wrote this report, The Size and Shape of Workforce Risk. It's really great. I recommend you go check it out. There's lots of numbers in there. You can help benchmark yourself against other organizations. But one thing that was kind of really surprising that came out of this report, and one of the reasons I picked it, is that we think of kind of security controls as we put them in place and everybody's safe, but they don't actually get applied kind of uniformly across organizations. So what we looked at is how departments within each individual organization, how effectively they were blocking malware that got downloaded by their users. And some organizations, like the top organization or the bottom organization, have really kind of uniform ability to block malware. So the top organization does a terrible job. Most of the departments there don't block any malware. If it gets downloaded, it's going to get executed. The one on the bottom, organization 3 there, does a better job. They towards the end, they block almost 100% of malware. But this one in the middle was kind of, and somewhat common across the data we saw, that they didn't block everything. Some departments were really good. They blocked like 100% of what got downloaded, some didn't. And so I think this idea that you need to check your security controls, make sure that they're actually applied everywhere within your organization is really important. And an interesting thing that kind of dropped out of this, an assumption that kind of got violated. And so who in the organization has that risk is important, both internally, and I think Amanda is going to talk about how that happens externally as well.
Yeah, so I'm Amanda Getty. I am the data storyteller here at Scientia, and I had the pleasure of working with Risk Recon all last year. And this was the first of a couple of pieces that we wrote with Risk Recon, navigating the internet risk surface. It's what we do all the time, right? We're trying to figure out how we can stay safe and keep our businesses afloat and also, have a successful business. But one of the things that is always kind of that seesaw moment is, okay, what is really the difference between choosing a partner that's a top performer and a bottom performer, and does it really matter? This whole report dives into this, and what you can see from these two images is that, yeah, it really does. And there is not just a slight difference, there is a massive difference between them. And in order to do this, we looked at the high finding density. So we looked at high and critical findings that affect high value assets for our data sets. And we used this as a proxy to kind of assign organizational risk posture. So when you choose a partner that has more findings, more variability in their findings, you're finding yourself in a position that you're taking on more risk than you probably want. And in that bottom right graph, you can see that we truly can confidently say that when you choose a partner that is a top performer, you're substantially better off than choosing one that's a bottom performer, green being the top performer, orange being the bottom performer. And the biggest differential, because we looked at industry size, region, and a bunch of key factors that you may be looking at when you're trying to figure out your partners in your supply chain, is that whether your partner is has a cloud-based host versus an on-prem host tends to be the biggest signaler if they are going to be a top performer or a bottom performer. Lots of other great little tidbits in there. But with that being said, I am going to pass it on off to David to talk through Iris.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amanda. Hello, everybody. I'm David Seversky. I'm yet another data scientist here at the Scientia Institute. I'm thrilled to talk to you, perhaps once again, because I recognize many names here on the attendee list, about IRIS, the Information Risk Insight Study, which I think is one of our broadest report series to date. We've been covering all types of things about losses for 2020 was our first IRIS there. So I guess we're going on 3 years now. My goodness, the time does fly. So IRIS, for anyone who's not familiar with it, is all of our study about what happens when all the controls we've been talking about up till now go wrong, or at least are not successful at preventing the threats from attacking the things that we care about in our environment. IRIS is a fantastic study we've done in long collaboration with Advisen, part of the Zywave family there, which has a large 100,000 plus database of breaches of actual real world events with real losses, real companies, real data being exfiltrated or otherwise compromised out there, that we're able to analyze and give you actionable guidance for actually doing risk management. This is more about how do we get out and actually do risk management rather than just staring at our fingers and our thumbs about these types of things. So there's so many great things to choose about IRIS. And IRIS 2022, we were delighted to have the grateful sponsorship of DHS CISA. So thank you very much to CISA for sponsoring that. That is fantastic. We consider that a real mark of confidence in the work we're doing here, that this has been useful for the practitioners in general. As I was mentioning, there's so many things we can choose from here, but I have to go with one of the classics, the loss succeedance curve there, where we say that when controls fail, the typical loss, looking over a 10-year span, is not that much. You only have about an 8.6% chance of a loss of 100K or greater. And if you are fortunate enough to be in a large organization, 100K loss may not seem like all that much to you there. But if you keep on looking out towards the right on that curve, you see it get longer and longer, and this is on a log scale, so those numbers get bigger really, really fast. So there's a 2% chance that you'll have, more or less, you'll have a loss of 10 million or greater. And you see that line goes way out into the billions of dollars out there. There are some losses in our data set that are in the billions. And I think we've actually seen some recently, which are maybe even in multiples of double digits there. I needed to actually double check that figure though. So what we're saying is that, yes, risk management matters, and that even though the typical loss isn't that much, the loss when things are really bad can be catastrophic. And that carries over to, and I get 2 in a row on this one. I can do the slide navigation bit. Yes, I can. That carries over to another one of our sibling products for Iris. In addition to the Iris Public, we have our Risk Retina series, which is a private for subscription service there. If you're interested, please contact your local INTS sales representative, where we actually put out the Risk Retina for the nonprofit sector. This is publicly available, and as you may notice that we have the download links down here for each of these reports. They'll be in an email after this webinar as well. But what we see here is that size matters. What we've seen in Iris is that the revenue size for an organization, based upon how much dollars they're coming in, whether you're a profit or a nonprofit there, that you have coming in does matter in terms of frequency. But in terms of the size of losses there, we're not seeing, and we still have yet to see, a direct relationship between the size of the company and the size of loss incurred, which is interesting. I think there's often this conception that, you know, the Fortune 500s have the biggest losses, and yes, those companies do have large losses, but there's not a statistically valid relationship between the size of the firm and the company involved. So with that, I'll turn it back to our next presentation. Carolyn, you want to talk about this one?
Awesome. Thank you, David. Hi, as he said, I'm Carolyn. I'm the digital marketing coordinator here at the Scientia Institute. Now, as the digital marketing coordinator and the newest member of this awesome team here, part of my position is laying out the reports and finalizing the story that everybody is trying to tell. One of the things that first struck me is how much attention to detail and expertise there is going into the analysis of the massive amounts of data that all these guys dig into. This chart from our Securonics report perfectly exemplifies how it all comes together to tell a story that is visually engaging and well representative of the data. Not only is it clean and easy to read, there's a visual representation of what's happening as an alert goes through its journey to determine if a policy has generated data that was concerning. As it's one of our goals to produce work that builds community knowledge, we're always striving to relay the analysis in our reports in ways that officially communicate with people of a variety of backgrounds and in many different industries. The team strategically designs the charts, writes comprehensive analysis, and then creates customized design elements so that this final report comes together to clearly communicate the stories behind the data. In this case, the figure 11, the funnel of policies from finding the signal through the noise, the graph clearly helps us understand that less than 1% of policies are doing work that generates an alert that's potentially concerning, and that these alerts were whittled down by going through this funnel in a clear visual representation of some of the analysis that this team did, and it exemplifies how we strive to communicate in that clear and succinct manner through our report. And next up is John, who has another really well-designed pair of charts to share.
Thank you very much, Carolyn, for trying to make me blush on camera. I am John Sturgis with the Scientia Institute, and I get to talk to you today a little bit about the series of reports we've produced in the last year with Arete, an incident response and managed security services provider. And just like incident response, putting a report together is a team effort. On this one, I believe people played various roles. We had Amanda, Olivia, Carolyn, and I all kind of pitched in at different points on this one. In volumes 1 and 2 of the investigative cybercrime series, we looked at about 1,500 ransomware cases since about 2019. Volume 1 focused primarily on victims and impacts of these events. And you can see in the chart in the top center here that demands, that kind of darker blue pattern. You see this pretty consistent rise over time and then this big drop off. But then in lighter blue below it, you can see the payment rates, or the payment amounts, sorry. To me, when I actually found the kind of did the scratch version of this figure, it was pretty shocking to me to see just how flat the payments were over that amount of time, given how stark that rise was in demands. Similar to that in volume 2, where we focused a lot more on the attackers in the ransomware kind of equation, you can see that there's this pretty big drop off in leading ransomware families as you go year to year. Definitely some rise to the top and then they fall back down almost as quickly. And I kind of picked these two charts mainly because they exemplify what I love about really digging into the data, which is, in this case, it can challenge our assumptions or even counter a popular narrative. Because I think anyone in our field for the last few years has heard plenty of potentially overblown concern about ransomware rates and things like that. But when you actually dig in, you see some maybe surprising dynamics at play. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jay, who's going to talk about volume 12 of Vericode's State of Software Security.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so I get to talk about Vericode as well here, as well as the Kenna research. And Vericode is another partner that we've done multiple years with, and we get to work with them as the landscape evolves. And we get to really, like the first year we may do a pass and try to find some things. And the second year we can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And this is, I think, the fourth year. And actually, we just came out, I believe, last week with volume 13. And I would like to talk about both of them. Actually, I could love to spend time on any of these that we've done with Vericode. But one of the things was really hard to pick out a single graphic to talk about because there are so many different aspects. I mean, part of the cool thing working here is that we get so many different aspects of security, but then we get to pick something like this is talking about application security in the development lifecycle. There are so many aspects in just that one little niche of security. And this, I think, exemplifies that, because if you look at some guidance for, application security and secure coding practices, you may hear people talk about this weakness or that problem. And this chart is showing that you cannot go to a developer and start talking about the risks of SQL injection or buffer overflow or whatever without first understanding what environment they're coding in. And that's really important, because if you start talking about buffer overflows to a Java developer, you're going to probably have them gloss over and just not care about it. Or CLF injection to a C developer, It's just these are things that some languages just don't care about or need to care about some things, and others need to care about things a lot. And then the other thing to look at is the scale on the vertical axes of these charts. So depending on the language, these are a proportion of applications that had findings. And so in like Java, for example, CRLF injection, 4 out of 5 applications at the end of this data set had CRLF injection in there. And that is a staggering number. And it's no wonder that this, gets transferred into other challenges around what I talked about before, vulnerability management and things like that. And so it's just super interesting to look at these various aspects and look at some of the challenges and actually see what's going on with developers, the fingers on the keyboard. What are they doing? And the other thing we like to look at is remediation timeline. In the latest one that just came out, we looked at the rate of introduction and the probability of developers introducing a flaw, and how things like how old the application is, how active they're doing security scanning, things like that. How do those play into the security of an application? And that's in the latest one. And with that, we're at 25 after. One of the things that we also want to talk about, I'll pass it off to David to go into some library stuff and bring us home.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Jay. Let me see if I can manage. Yay, I can manage keyboard. Thanks. So, the famous one last thing. We here at Cybersecurity Institute, we realize you have a choice who you spend your attention dollars on and whose research you read. We're very grateful that you choose to spend some of it with us there, but we realize we're not the only ones out there. There's far more research than we've covered here today, both our own and many, many others as well. We try to maintain a library of all the data-driven research we can possibly find out of the Scientia Cybersecurity Research Library. This is entering its second year of sponsorship from F5. We're very grateful for their continued support to make this happen. This is a free resource that's available at library.scientia.com. We maintain throughout the week with new research there that shows you who's producing what particular topics you may be interested in. You can subscribe to our newsletter, and you can also find us on various social media as well. So with that, we are at time. Thank you so much for attending. This is our first of a monthly series of webinars there. We're going to be doing many more in the coming months. Hopefully you will continue to subscribe to those. We'd love to hear topics that you may be interested in covering. We have some ideas, but we're always interested in hearing more from the folks that we're trying to serve with our research. On that note, I'll also mention that we've covered a huge variety of different data sources here, everything from application security to application risk management to losses, et cetera there. But we realize that this is only some of the areas of domains that may be of interest. If you know of a data set that would be interesting to suggest to us, or even better, that you could make an introduction to a vendor that would be interested in us, we are interested in expanding our scope of coverage this year. We'd love to hear you. You can write to us at info@scientia.com or wherever you find your social medias. With that, I will check to see if we have any questions, and we can spend a couple more minutes seeing if there's anything else we need to cover.
I have a quick question for the group, if I may. I was just wondering if anybody had any research that they know of that's in the pipe that they're excited about, or anything that they're working on. And I know, like Ben, for example, you just did some more work with F5, again, into vulnerability stuff. And I don't know, there's just some interesting stuff coming down the pipe. If anybody wants to talk about that, I thought it'd be an opportune moment to do so.
Shows how much Jay was paying attention, because I talked about Elevate Security, who we do actually have another report coming out with next month. We're going to do a webinar and to build on the work we've already done with them. He did mention we are also doing work with F5 on CVE research. That's real exciting. That'll also be out in the next few weeks. 2023 is already off and running, and I'll leave it to everybody else to talk about what they're excited with.
Well, I can mention that. Oh, please go ahead, Wade.
I will mention another report from Security Scorecard that is due out very soon, and it doesn't look at vulnerabilities like the last one that I spoke about, but this time totally different topic. We look at third and fourth party relationships and how things get messy as you move from your organization to all the other ones down the chain that you're working with. And that one was pretty cool, because it's kind of the first time we've been able to look at those nth tier relationships and see the issues that crop up.
Fantastic. And speaking of relationships there, we have some new work coming out with Risk Recon, talking about relationships there, talking about third-party relationships that are actually being identified by customers there. Great things to see on that, so stay tuned for all of that. If you're interested in any of this or other work, we do have a very low volume newsletter, which you can find out at scientia.com. I encourage you to subscribe, where you can get notices of all of our upcoming research there, and you can be the first on your blog to read about it. Thank you so much for attending. We're right at time there, so I'll go ahead and close out now, and thank you all once again.